This recipe is for really nice gooey chocolate brownies, and to make them you're going to need 185 grams of butter, 200 grams of dark chocolate. I've already broken that up in the packet so it's easier once it goes into the pan to melt. In the box here I've got 85 grams of plain flour and 40 grams of cocoa powder. So those are put in together because they're going to get sieved together anyway. I've got 275 grams of golden caster sugar, but normal caster sugar would do if that's all you've got. I've got 3 large eggs and a bag of chocolate chunks or chocolate chips or whatever you want to use, or you could chop up a 100 gram bar of chocolate. If you want to do half white, half milk, that's up to you. So before I start, I'm going to put a medium-sized pan of water, it's about a quarter full, and I'm going to put that on to boil, ready to melt the chocolate and the butter. And then the chocolate and the butter are going to go into a medium-sized bowl. I don't want this too big, but it has to sit on the saucepan without touching the water. So I'm just going to spread the chocolate out so it's actually touching the glass of the bowl. And the next thing I would do to that is to chop up and add the butter. So the butter is just going to sit on top of the chocolate. They will both melt together, and that's probably going to take about 5 minutes or so while you get everything else ready. You then need to give it time to cool down a little bit, or it's going to scramble the eggs. So it sits over the pan of hot water. As soon as you start seeing steam coming up the sides, you can turn that right down and leave it on a low simmer. You don't want it to boil really madly and heat the bowl too much. Now the chocolate is partly melted. I'm just going to stir the butter into it, and that will obviously start to melt a lot more quickly rather than just sitting on top. It's going to go back on the pan. Another minute or two, it should be done. Now the chocolate is almost melted. I'm ready for the next step, which is to crack the 3 eggs into a large mixing bowl and sprinkle the caster sugar over it. And you're going to use an electric whisk, and this again is going to take about 5 minutes. Whisk it up until it's quite light and fluffy. So start off on slow and then speed up, and you're going to want to pause then because it really will take 5 minutes. Obviously if you're using white caster sugar it's going to look a lot paler at this point, but it's still okay. Now I haven't quite finished whisking yet, but the chocolate is now quite melted. There's a few little pieces of butter left, so I've taken it off the heat because you don't want to get it too hot in the first place and then add it into a whisked egg mixture because it's going to start cooking it. So that will just gradually melt and cool by the time I finish whisking. See, this is now quite a lot thicker and whippier and paler. It's not quite ready, so I'm going to give it about another minute. So that's whipped enough, and the aim is, because it's only using plain flour, this is adding in enough air to help the brownies to rise just a little. Meanwhile, you also need to have ready a tray or tin. It could be square, it could be rectangle. It needs to be fairly large if it's a square one, and I greased and lined it with a sheet of baking paper. If you're using a foil one, it does help to sit it on a metal baking tray so that it's something to grab hold of without bending the foil. So the next step, our chocolate's now cooled down a little, and I'm going to fold it in using the spatula that I've scraped it all out of the bowl with. So try not to lose any, get it all out of the bowl, and very gently mix it through. Try not to knock out too many of those bubbles. You can see it's quite airy still, but you should lose that marbled look and start to have it quite thoroughly combined. Before putting the flour and cocoa mixture in, I'm just going to put them into a bowl and mix them together a little, just so that they are more quickly combined when they go in. So just give a little mix. If you've got a lot of lumps in your cocoa, you might need to do this a little bit more, or you might want to sieve it twice. And that's then going to get sieved over the mixture in the bowl. I'm going to tip it in and shake it through. Try to distribute it evenly across the mixture and push the last bits through with a spoon. Don't lose any of those lumps of cocoa. Just press them through. So still using the spatula, I'm then going to fold it through nice and gently, and all of that dry floury look will go. It should be quite sticky, but don't over mix it or you're going to knock out all of that air. So I'll take about a minute. So the final stage then is to add your chocolate chunks or chocolate chips or sweets or whatever you're putting in, and again just gently mix it through. And there's the mixture complete. The mixture now needs to go into the tin, so it's easier if you can pick up the bowl and just drop it in. Either that, or you get a large tablespoon and you spoon it in. So it should still look quite fluffy. Try not to just pile it all in one area. Share it out around your tin. And that will involve less spreading then and less air being knocked out. So just going to gently push it into the corners. Now this is going to take about 25 to 30 minutes to cook, and it'll have that sort of cracked skin look on top and should be still quite fudgy in the middle. So you will need to test to check that it's done all the way through. Just stick a knife in. It shouldn't be too gooey, but you obviously don't want it dry because it should be quite fudgy brownie mixture. That's going to go in at 180 degrees. I've just checked it after 20 minutes and it's nowhere near done, so I've turned it round and put it back in for another 5. So when I put a skewer in it, it came out really liquid. Definitely needs more cooking time. That took about 27 minutes to cook. It's got a crisp top. It's not too crunchy around the edges, and that does soften as it cools anyway. And when I drop a skewer into it, there's a few crumbs on it, but it's not gooey. That now needs to cool in the tin completely before cutting.